What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with a solo podcast. Before we get started, the usual reminder, please remember to subscribe to us if you haven't done so already. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Also, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Like, comment, help the algorithm love us back. If you have done all those things, we ask that you tell people about us. Spread the word. Tell your friends, family members, acquaintances, random people on the street, enemies, social media people. Shout us out on Twitter. Retweet us on Twitter. Quote something we said on the podcast on Twitter. Anything you can do to help spread the word about what is just a certified fantabulous podcast, in my totally unbiased opinion, would mean the absolute world. Let's get to some bold predictions for the rest of the season that I came up with. And the goal here, I did this, Bleacher Report asked me to do this, so I'm going to relay it to you guys here to see what you think. The goal here is just me gauging the tenor of what's left of the season, what we've seen so far, what's happening right now, and deciding, hey, these thoughts go against consensus, but I kind of believe them to be true enough that I'm throwing them out here. I will say that I try to go with more than 50% conviction on them. One of these, and I'll start off with that one, I'm kind of waffling on whether I have 50% conviction on, but let's start this off. Again, we'll see how wrong I am. I did this exercise, I think, a month ago, and I feel pretty good still about half. I said Damian Lillard was going to make first team All NBA. I no longer think that after he gets shut down. It's not out after he got shut down, not outside the realm of possibility, but it's not something that I feel just particularly bullish on anymore. So thought this would still be a fun exercise. My first one, bold prediction number one. Jaylen Brown will make an all NBA team and become Supermax eligible. This is a big deal. He has a lot of money riding on the all NBA rosters. If he makes an all NBA team, he will be eligible to sign a 4-year Supermax extension worth a hair under $218 million. Forget about that number. Merely having the ability to sign that deal would go a long way towards clarifying his future with the Celtics. At the moment, there's not too much cause to fret over his ambiguous comments. Without a first career All NBA nod, he can only put pen to paper on an extension that nets him a 120% raise. It makes all the financial sense in the world for him to hit free agency in 2024 and not sign an extension. That calculus changes with Supermax eligibility. If he doesn't sign any sort of extension, or if the Celtics don't offer one, then Bostonians can start sweating it out. And also, Brian Toporek recently wrote about this for Forbes. The extension parameters might change in the new CBA. They're talking about maybe allowing 150% raises in extensions. I don't know. That still wouldn't bring Brown to what his max could be, but it would certainly help the cause. For now, though, Brown is better off prepping for free agency without his Supermax eligibility. Whether he gets the opportunity to be Supermax eligible is what we're debating here. He needs to get to that All NBA roster first. He'll be eligible at both guard and forward. It's not happening as a guard. The pool of candidates is just too saturated. You have Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Damian Lillard. I would argue those are all locks to take 4 of the spots. Then you have De'Aaron Fox, Donovan Mitchell, John Morant, Devin Booker, and James Harden, among some other guys who will vie for those final 2 slots. Brown, though, again, he's played most of his minutes at the 3 per cleaning the glass this year, and he's going to be eligible at forward. Giannis and Jason Tatum are probably the only 2 forwards I would pencil in as locks. You could, building it out from there, you could include other locks. Jimmy Butler, does he belong there? But there are extensive absences from Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard. That was from the beginning of the year that help open things up. All 3 of those guys, by the way, are on track to fall outside the top 125 in total minutes played. Each of them could grab an All NBA spot, in my opinion. None of them could grab it. Someone like Zion Williamson, already out of the running. Those repressed cases are really going to help out Jaylen Brown's path to All NBA. They won't guarantee it, though. Like I said, Jimmy Butler, he might be close to a lock at this point. You have Pascal Siakam, Lauri Markkanen, Julius Randle. All those guys are going to want a word. The other thing we have to account for here, which is why I'm not super confident in this one. What if the NBA does its typical fudging the positional eligibility thing, where let's say Anthony Davis and Domas Sabonis are allowed to be voted in as forwards because they want, or Bam Adebayo, just because we've seen it before with Jokic and Embiid being eligible as forwards, and they're clearly not forwards. This year, I don't know how that's going to work. There isn't going to be as big enough of a push. I think you look and there's again, it's 4 centers that could contend for it in theory. I guess 5, throwing Davis, Bam Adebayo, Domas Sabonis, Joel Embiid, and Jokic. And so if 2 of those guys are eligible at forward and it helps you fit all of them in on an all NBA team, that would theoretically hurt Brown's chances. At the same time, like Brown is averaging basically 27 points, 3 assists, a steal a game, downing over 57% of his twos. His 3-point clip has dipped a little bit, but he is connecting on almost 47% of his off the dribble 2-point jumpers. That's big. It's also the second highest mark of his career, and he's never averaged more free throw attempts per 36 minutes. I think we also need to account his defensive responsibilities scale higher than pretty much anyone else he's battling. When you're looking at, okay, Kawhi, no. And Jimmy Butler, no. But Pascal Siakam, Julius Randle, Larry Markkinen, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, even if you want to throw Sabonis in there, not Bam or Davis. Forget their centers. Let's forget those guys for now. So that has to matter too. And Marcus Smart, per B-Ball Index, is the only Celtics player that has spent more time guarding number 1 and number 2 options. Ultimately, there's still too much season left for me to say I believe with every fiber of my being Jaylen Brown will make an All-NBA team. But I think his candidacy is convincing enough to roll the dice, especially if you think, as I do, that voters will favor players who are, 1, extremely available, like Brown has been, and have extension money on the line. And so I think we could see, I don't want to say an overinflation of support for Jaylen Brown, John Morant, but I think that those guys might receive more support than we collectively may initially believe when media members know that they have all this extension money on the line. Let's move on to bold prediction number 2. I have this. It's going to be wildly unpopular. The Memphis Grizzlies will lose in the first round of the playoffs. Matchups stand to dictate the fate of the entire 2023 Western Conference playoffs. The landscape is either gloriously chaotic or sweepingly unspectacular or some combination of both. That waters down the spiciness of me forecasting any first round exit. There's some extra heat here, though, when I'm making it before the postseason lineup gets set and when said team is on a streak. Enter my distrust of the Memphis Grizzlies. They're really good, and they're about to, in all likelihood, finish with the West's second best record. They've managed to put some distance between themselves and the Sacramento Kings, despite navigating absences from Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, and John Morant. Their defense is as advertised. It's absolute hellfire. Jaren Jackson Jr. would probably be the runaway favorite for Defensive Player of the Year if his minutes per game were higher, and he still might be the runaway favorite anyway. The Grizzlies as a whole are just in your face. They defend like controlled anarchy. They're all over the place, and finding weak points to target in their defense can be tough, even when Morant is on the floor this season, even this side of the Luke Kennard trade. That still doesn't mean we have to trust them, and I don't. The offense, to me, doesn't seem playoff proof. They're hovering around the bottom 10 in 3-point attempt rate. They're hovering around the bottom 5 in 3-point accuracy. They are hovering around the bottom 5 in catch and shoot effective field goal percentage. And they are in the bottom 10 in overall half-court efficiency. That heavy dependence on second chance opportunities and transition frequency is not easily translatable to the postseason. We saw that even as they put up a fight against the Golden State Warriors last year. Memphis is going to be even harder pressed to sustain its offensive rebounding presence if Steven Adams isn't ready to rock. We also know Brandon Clark is out for the season. The Grizzlies have struggled on the glass ever since Adams went down with that right knee injury. I will say, this is cause for pause. The Grizzlies are hovering around the top 5 in half-court offense since the All-Star break without an over-reliance on second chance points. That is incredible. It also doesn't infer a new normal. Dylan Brooks has been shooting well from 3. That won't last. The team has been shooting like 50% on log mid-range jumpers. That won't last. Luke Kennard has been good for them offensively, but his minutes, I think, will get harder to survive in the playoffs. Is Tyus Jones going to continue playing like this into the postseason? Yeah, he's a starting caliber point guard, but is he going to flame throw at this level? These Grizzlies still have the same flaws that they did last year, and I think that's going to make them even more exploitable once they get into the playoffs. Internal leaps from Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane help, but the roster, again, projects to be more shorthanded overall. You're not going to rely on Zaire Williams for heavy minutes, and you're going to be without Brandon Clark, and then who knows what Steven Adams is what his availability is going to look like. This then raises a question for me and for all of us, I would think. Who, beyond the faintest shadow of a doubt, do you trust the Grizzlies to beat in the first round? Dallas, Minnesota, Golden State, Lakers, Clippers, those are all teams that they could beat that they might even be favored against, but they're not teams that you can just outright trust them to beat. I guess Dallas would come closest here. The optimism is going to bleed through if you wind up facing Utah, New Orleans, or Oklahoma City. My counterpoint would be, would it? Utah's not going to make the playoffs, so just whatever. And so they don't matter here. What if the Pelicans get Zion Williamson back? Their defense has also just been playing better of late, and they've done a better job incorporating Jonas Valanciunas on offense. Or so they could be this version of the Pelicans. They could have the version of the Pelicans with Zion back. They would be scary. Underestimate the Thunder at your own risk. They sort of feel a little too happy to be here right now, but they're a team that has improved a great deal on offense. They would have they would have the best player in that series this season in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they just have a lot of different options they could throw at you defensively as well. Again, Memphis would be favored in, I don't want to say majority of these series, but a good handful of them. I just don't think we can trust them to beat anyone that I really just named. If it was the Jazz, sure. If you want to say New Orleans and Oklahoma City, sure. But if it ends up being Dallas, Minnesota, Golden State, Lakers, Clippers, things get really weird there. So yes, Memphis could definitely still make it out of the first round. They should probably even be favored to make it out of the first round. That's sort of the whole point of the exercise that I'm doing, though. These predictions are not givens. I have the Grizzlies losing in the first round of playoffs. Grizzlies fans should probably thank me later because I'm just so constantly wrong about them. It's almost impressive. My bold prediction number 3, the Bulls will make the playoffs. This is bold because 538 gives them like a 30% chance of making the playoffs right now. It's also bold if you watch them just get, well, I started recording this before it was over, but if you watch them get trounced by the LA Clippers on Monday night. I'm trying to sit here straight-faced and continue to make this prediction about the 10th place team in the East, that they're going to win the play-in tournament and make the postseason. At the same time, I also can't pretend to understand what's happening in Oklahoma City. The Bulls are over 500 since the All-Star break with the top 3 defense and top 6 net rating. Their 44-point shellacking of Brooklyn on February 24th inflates those returns, but they're still 11th in defense when you pull that one out, and with a comfortably positive point differential per 100 possessions. And you could also say, look, Chicago had that own blowout loss to the Sixers on, March 22nd, who they actually beat on March 20th, by the way. They did beat the Sixers. That also skews their returns in the wrong direction. So that, in theory, would balance it out. I don't know whether you could believe in this late season revival. I myself am oozing skepticism. I'm not going to dismiss it either. The Bulls aren't going to can 38+% of their threes until the end of time. The roster's not built for it. But it's also not like they're suddenly taking a ton more threes, nor is anyone playing especially over their head. They've had to deal with DeMar DeRozan's banged up quad. They've had to deal with absences from Alex Caruso. But like, it's so they're not really even being helped there. And the backup big man rotation is still sort of a mess. But Zach LaVine is torching defenses from every level. That's not unheard of. DeMar DeRozan continues to be DeRozan, even as he's playing through that quad injury. Patrick Williams' efficiency has been off the charts, and yet they're still dealing with the same ultra low volume issues. And they run into those same issues with Patrick Beverley and Alex Caruso too. Kobe White's bandwagon is a little more crowded during the stretch. It has not filled up beyond reason. Nikola Vucevic is doing most of his damage outside the jump shot arena, or at least the 3-point arena. The defensive success, when you look at it, it feels like an anomaly, but then it's sort of like, okay, maybe not. It would be a season-long one then. Chicago does seem to be getting lucky on opponent shooting from close range and at the foul line, but they're not getting overly fortunate anywhere else. And the exterior defense remains stacked with these lively pests who contest everything, get inside jerseys, take charges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Emotionally invest yourself in the Pesquier Bulls with a metric ton of salt. When you're scaling ahead, they should still probably rebuild over the offseason. They shouldn't double down on this core. Don't financially invest in them either by any stretch. Don't predict for them to make it out of the first round, to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals or whatever. But I'm not presupposing that Chicago will win a first-round playoff series against Milwaukee, Boston, or Philly. I'm just saying they will get there. And I think when you look at the play-in field right now, this says more perhaps about my distrust in Brooklyn, Atlanta, and Toronto than it does about my trust in Chicago. I still think if you're going to put those 4 teams together, to say that Chicago is the one that survives, and I'm just saying Miami won't be the team that makes the play in here now, so I am making a little bit of a prediction there. I don't think it's unruly, but it is statistically a bit of a long shot. Bold prediction number 4. This one leaks into the offseason. It's going to be an unpopular one, especially amongst Herb Jones Enjoyer in Discord. I think New Orleans is going to break up the big three over the offseason. Optimism is definitely running a little higher around the Pelicans. They're on a 5-game winning streak. Uh, they beat the Clippers on Saturday night. That's a big one. But they also, I'm not going to throw confetti for them beating the Spurs, the Rockets, this version of the Blazers. Still, in their defense, the offense seems to have remembered that Jonas Valanciunas exists over the past week or so. The defense is 7th in points allowed per possession since the All-Star break. And while Zion isn't definitely coming back, he's not coming back either. That's basically the updates we keep getting. I still just, I can't believe in the recent surge. It's not that they have the talent, but I don't know that they're ever going to piece it together at the same time. Pretty much everything unraveled after the Zion injury. New Orleans is now 13, even after this winning streak, they're now 15 and 23 during that time, with almost a bottom 5 offense and a shot profile that's begging for more threes and rim pressure. Brandon Ingram did miss a huge chunk of this stretch himself, but his return has not represented this singular solve. The Pelicans are getting spanked when he and CJ McCollum play without Zion, while living and dying, far too extensively from the mid-range. Expecting New Orleans to break up its big three, which is basically just a way of saying they will trade Ingram or McCollum, might seem like an overreaction. Of course, the Pelicans aren't great. Zion has yet again missed most of the season. How good are they supposed to be? My issue is it's better than this. The Pelicans need to do a better job reworking their core, both in and outside Zion's image. Surrounding him with more high-volume snipers and a rim-protecting center is a must. His general transcendence can paper over a lot of other issues. New Orleans, though, cannot count on him being available enough for that to make a difference. And so when you're reorienting the core around him, it's not that you're trying to plan for the worst case scenario so much as reacting to life as you know it. With and without him, the Pelicans need a better offensive organizer who has a more consistent presence from deep or at the basket. There's a little too much overlap in both the individual strengths and weaknesses of McCollum and Ingram to fancy New Orleans a finished product near the top. Again, it would be different if you were to say Zion's going to play in 60 games every season. You don't get to say that. We have these 4 years worth of evidence to back up that that's not going to happen at this point. I think the counter here would be the Pelicans can absolutely shake up the base of its rotation without moving McCollum or Ingram. They have future first-round picks and prospect equity to cobble together competitive offers independent of both those players. But this prediction indulges an increasingly strong inkling that New Orleans needs a better second or third best player to optimize its window with Zion and will be prepared, if not forced, to act on it. And the final thing to consider there would be, let's say they can pull off a blockbuster trade or two, a big trade. And maybe they decide not to pull off a big trade. That would be a mistake if they don't reorient the core in some fashion. They can keep Ingram and McCollum. It's what I would do. Here's the issue, though, is you get to a point where matching salary is harder to come by. You have Larry Nance's money, Jonas Valanciunas' money, and that's like kind of the biggest salary numbers that you could use if you're not going to move a Zion, McCollum, or an Ingram there. And you also have to start worrying about, because you're going to have Zion's max extension kicking in, about paying the tax. The Pelicans have said they would pay the tax for the right team. So many teams say that. And so if you're tacking on someone with a big salary, and maybe, look, you're even trying to keep Jackson Hayes, who's going to be a restricted free agent. Are you looking at bringing back Josh Richardson? As of right now, if they renounce Jackson Hayes and they don't bring back Josh Richardson, they're still going to be, they won't be in the tax, but they're going to be like fairly close to the tax. Maybe they'll have within $7 million in the tax is where the spreadsheet I'm looking at has them within 8 million, really. That's less than the non-taxpayers mid-level exception. So if you use the non-taxpayers mid-level, you'd be committing to going into the tax there. If you're taking on a bigger number than just an $11 million player, if you're trying to turn, Larry Nance Jr. and Jonas Valanciunas into a more expensive player, you're going to be willing to enter the tax next season or the season after that. That comes into play, which is why looking at moving a McCollum or an Ingram might be viewed as financially prudent within the Pelicans front office or among ownership. I wouldn't support it, but that's just my gut feeling here is that McCollum or Ingram will be traded over the offseason. If they keep playing like this or Zion comes back and they just rip off a deep playoff push, then it probably won't happen. And again, I'm not rooting for it to happen. I would love to see this team as currently constructed add some rim protection, some shooting, and then go into next season. But the Zion health bugaboo hanging over all of this just leads me to believe that we might see something a little bit more seismic than most people are counting on as we head into the offseason. Let's see if I'm wrong. Let's see if I'm wrong there. My fifth and final bold prediction: Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will finish sixth in MVP in the I'll say top 6 of MVP voting to leave open the door that he could finish in the top 5 still, which that would be a real bold prediction. Those who own residential real estate on the edge are free to bump this up to that top 5 finish. I came pretty close to going there myself when I was doing this exercise. It's a little too bold for my taste. SGA is not going to surpass Giannis, Joel Embiid, or Nikola Jokic. And then leapfrogging even one of Luka Doncic or Jason Tatum at this point feels like a stretch. I think you could make a case for it right now. I really do. But that's 5 spots right there. That would mean one more is left up for grabs in the top 6. And MVP ballots, by the way, they go 5 players deep, but because of the point system and how many different names appear, they come up with a consensus top 10. And SGA currently sits 6th on my own MVP ladder. He's not assured to get it. He's definitely helped by limited availability from let's say Steph, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Kawhi. Any one of them could still technically appear on ballots. I would think that Curry would probably have the best chance of the bunch, maybe Kawhi. Domantas Sabonis, Damian Lillard, and James Harden all hover around the top 10 of the hashtag discourse. Jimmy Butler is definitely going to cannibalize some consideration. Devin Booker and Anthony Davis have probably played just enough to absorb some too. People with long-term memories won't soon forget Donovan Mitchell or John Morant either. Then we have the win-loss purists. They might struggle to consider the best player on a team that is neither guaranteed to finish at or above 500 or in the top of the half of the conference as an MVP candidate. Like that, this SGA is not the only player this could impact, but he is the newest entry into that megastar tier, which also might hurt him, and it renders him uniquely vulnerable to oversight. It should not, of course. SGA is averaging over 30 points and 5 assists while hitting more than 53% of his twos, generating 10 plus free throw attempts per game, and playing the kind of defense that makes you dream big, even if a little recklessly. Even during the era of broken statistical records, this meld of volume and efficiency bends your brain. Prior to this season, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and James Harden were the only players to clear 30 points and 5 assists while matching SGA's current true shooting percentage. Dinging Shai for Oklahoma City's record or even his aversion to three-point shooting rings hollow in the MVP discourse. He is still among the toughest covers in the league thanks to the eccentricity of his off-the-dribble cadence. And the Thunder are also winning the minutes with him on the court by more than Dallas wins the minutes with Luka Doncic on the court. Are we going to penalize Shai then for the minutes that he's not on the court? That doesn't necessarily make sense to me. OKC at large is brimming with feel-good stories and developments. It is deep and improving and on the cusp of a higher-end arrival. SGA is still very much the soul of its operation. Among the 450-ish players who have been in at least 15 games this season, only Doncic and Trae Young see more of their baskets go unassisted. Shai, by the way, also continues to hover around the top 10 in clutch win probability added, according to Unpredictable. Like every other guesstimate here, SGA's fringe MVP candidacy is not inarguable. And I think it's bold to say they don't finish in the top 6. I myself am wondering, though, could he usurp one of Tatum or Doncic? I think it's a fair question. Regardless, his MVP case, fringe MVP case, because we know he's not going to finish in the top 3, it exists in airtight supply with the strength necessary and deserving of crashing the back end of the ballot. That'll do it for this episode. But as always, I leave you all first and foremost. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe if you've not already. If this is your first time checking us out, subscribe on YouTube, certainly, if you've made it this far. Like, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Tell people about us if you've done all those things. Shout outs on Twitter, quote us on Twitter, the whole 9. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast description. Until next time, and as always, I leave you with a shout out to the one, the only, Frank Ntilikina, and I offer my sincerest of apologies, like always, to Jared Allen.